83-year-old Mr. John Anderson, dressed in tattered clothes and worn-out leather shoes, dragged a heavy old sack slowly into the International Bank located in Manhattan, a bustling district of New York. The bank was housed in a modern skyscraper, its ground floor featuring massive glass curtain walls that reflected the city's clamor. The interior was spacious and brightly lit. A young bank clerk, Tom Wilson, scanned Mr. John from head to toe, his eyes filled with undisguised contempt, disrupting the otherwise elegant and serene atmosphere of the bank. Yet Mr. John did not retreat. His voice was slow but patient. "Sir, I'm here to deposit money. My money is in this sack." Despite the resolve in his eyes, Tom merely raised an eyebrow and let out a mocking laugh. Pointing at the sack with one finger, he sneered, "Money in that sack? Probably just a few coins, huh? We don't have time to deal with this sort of thing." Mr. John remained calm. His hands trembled slightly from dragging the heavy sack over a long distance, but his voice stayed gentle, as if emphasizing, "This is the money I earned with my sweat and blood. It's my life savings. I want to deposit it for future use." Tom couldn't suppress a sarcastic laugh. Several colleagues nearby began whispering to each other. One of them muttered, just loud enough for Mr. John to hear, "This bank has to deal with these sacks full of loose change? What a waste of time." In the luxuriously decorated bank, Mr. John seemed out of place. The transaction counters were designed with transparent bulletproof glass, and the back wall was adorned with expensive dark wood, creating a solemn and opulent ambiance. The bank employees, dressed in crisp uniforms with neatly tied ties, were busy handling transactions with well-dressed customers. Each time the bank's automatic doors opened, a gentle breeze accompanied the movement, but the sound of Mr. John's sack wheels dragging across the tiled floor was jarringly conspicuous, drawing sidelong glances from others. The heavy sack weighed him down, causing him to stoop slightly. Each step was heavy yet resolute. When he reached the transaction counter, Mr. John paused, carefully placing the sack on the floor. His gaze swept the surrounding space, as if confirming he was in the right place. However, his rugged appearance, small stature, and tattered plastic sandals drew everyone's attention. Their looks were filled with curiosity, disdain, and irritation. Some customers, dressed in expensive suits and glamorous evening gowns, cast unabashedly prying glances. Mr. John paid no mind to the whispers. His eyes remained fixed on the bank clerk before him as if expecting assistance. Instead, he was met with cold indifference and outright refusal. "What a waste of time. You should take your sack home." "We don't have time to deal with it," Tom said dismissively. Mr. John said nothing more. He bent down, picked up the heavy sack, and looked at Tom with a hint of sadness, but remained composed. Tom stood smugly, behind the counter, arms crossed, his eyes dripping with disdain. "Old man, we don't take loose change here. Take it home and don't waste our time again," he sneered. Mr. John gave a slight bow, his calloused hands tightly gripping the sack's edge. His voice remained gentle without a trace of anger. "This is my life savings. I want to deposit it so I can live securely in the future. If you won't accept it, I'll wait for someone who can make that decision." Tom snorted and turned to a colleague, mocking, "Did you hear that? He wants to see the manager, as if we have time to sit around counting loose change all day." Both laughed coldly. The atmosphere around the transaction counter grew tense. Nearby customers began whispering. A middle-aged man in a neat shirt glanced at Mr. John, shook his head, and said, "Such a disruption. I don't understand why this bank lets people like him in." A young woman who had just signed some documents gave Mr. John a scornful look and said to her friend, "What a waste of time. We're busy and don't have time for this farce." Suddenly, a middle-aged man in a high-end suit emerged from the transaction area. He introduced himself. "I'm the branch manager, Robert Johnson." His expression was stern as he strode toward the counter, his gaze shifting between Mr. John and the heavy sack on the floor. What's going on here? His voice cut through the room, instantly silencing the space. Tom straightened up, nodded to the manager, and quickly replied, "Nothing serious. This old man brought a bag of loose change to deposit, but we don't think it's worth our time to process." Manager Robert nodded, his gaze toward Mr. John still lacking empathy. He stepped closer, glanced at the sack, and said in a calm but dismissive tone, "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't process this money. You're only wasting the staff's and other customers' time by being here." Mr. John looked directly into the manager's eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, only sorrow. His voice remained slow and calm. "You can report this to your superiors. I'm prepared to wait." The manager frowned, clearly unwilling to argue further. He signaled to a nearby security guard, indicating to escort the old man out. "We can't let this disrupt the bank's normal operations." The tall security guard approached Mr. John and said in a low voice, "Sir, if there's nothing urgent." Mr. John stood his ground, his gaze sweeping the room. Most customers waiting at the counter avoided his eyes. A few looked displeased and turned away. None spoke up to defend the old man. Mr. John bent down slightly, lifting the heavy sack with trembling hands. His shoulders slumped under the weight, but his steps remained slow and steady. He didn't argue or show anger or resistance. The bank's atmosphere grew lively again, but the lingering impact of the scene left some uneasy, especially a young employee standing nearby. Watching the frail figure of the old man leave, his eyes were filled with concern. David Thompson, a young employee at a neighboring counter who had witnessed the entire incident, felt a pang of discomfort. Newly hired, his face still carried a hint of youth, his eyes bright and earnest. Seeing the unfair treatment of the old man, he spoke up, his voice soft but clear enough for the entire counter to hear. "He came here to deposit money. We should serve him. Shouldn't we at least check before refusing?" His words froze the atmosphere instantly. The employees who had mocked the old man turned to him, eyebrows raised, their voices laced with sarcasm. "You're too naive. Look at him. You don't get it. This old guy having a fortune to deposit? That sack's probably full of pennies. Counting it would take longer than the money's worth." The surrounding colleagues chuckled at the mockery, but David didn't back down. He stood up, walked directly to the old man, and gently asked, "Grandpa, can I take a look at your bag?" Mr. John looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he nodded in agreement. His frail hands loosened their grip, letting the sack rest on the floor. Several employees watched with disapproving looks, one muttering, "This is definitely worthless, a complete waste of time." David knelt down, carefully untying each knot on the sack. When the worn fabric was pulled back, an astonishing sight appeared. Dozens of neatly stacked piles of coins, meticulously bundled. The entire transaction counter fell silent. The mocking smiles vanished, replaced by the stunned and slightly puzzled looks of the staff. A nearby colleague couldn't help but blurt out, "That's loose change." David carefully took out each stack of coins, placing them on the counter. He turned to the old man and asked, "Grandpa, how long have you been saving this?" The old man replied gently, his voice calm yet filled with pride. "My whole life. This is money from selling lottery tickets, collecting recyclables, and working odd jobs. I saved every penny over the years. Every cent was earned through hard work." The employees and customers nearby, hearing his response, were struck with astonishment. Those who had mocked him began to show signs of shame. David silently looked at the pile of coins. Though they were small denominations, the sheer volume made it clear this was no small sum. He picked up a stack, his hands trembling slightly, then turned to the manager standing a few steps away, looking puzzled. "Mr. Johnson, this is a significant amount. We need to process it." The manager, now speechless, stood frozen. His gaze shifted from the piles of coins on the counter to the old man's calm face. The bank's atmosphere grew utterly silent, filled only with astonishment. The counter's money-counting machine began to hum as David carefully fed each stack of coins into it. The numbers on the screen climbed steadily, from millions to tens of millions, far exceeding everyone's expectations. The atmosphere in the bank solidified. The employees who had ridiculed the old man now stood quietly, their eyes fixed on the counting machine's screen. The numbers kept rising until they surpassed $4 billion, assuming a certain exchange rate. David paused, exhaling deeply as if trying to regain his composure. He turned to the old man, his voice tinged with awe but full of respect. "Sir, there's a lot of money in your sack. I'm still counting, but it may take more time to process. Please bear with us. May I continue?" Mr. John nodded slightly, his eyes showing no trace of pride or surprise. To him, this money was the result of a lifetime of hard work, and he didn't expect it to shock those around him. The counting machine's sound resumed, each stack of coins passing its inspection. The final figure displayed on the screen left, everyone breathless, $20 billion. David respectfully turned to the manager. "Mr. Johnson, this is a massive sum, and it's completely legitimate. We need to process it immediately." His words were like a resounding slap to the employees and customers who had mocked the old man. One employee stammered, "$20 billion? How could this old man save that much?" The manager, who had been dismissive earlier, stood awkwardly, his gaze shifting between the piles of money and the old man. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain his authority but unable to hide his confusion. Yes, we'll process this money immediately. We apologize for any inconvenience." Mr. John said nothing, simply watching the manager. His eyes held no blame, only calm, as if he was accustomed to such looks and attitudes throughout his life. A middle-aged customer, previously scornful, now sat quietly, staring thoughtfully at the pile of money. He muttered to the person next to him, "$20 billion." David continued processing the paperwork to open a savings account for the old man, filled with admiration for the elderly man's patience and composure. Though the stacks of coins were valuable, they carried a story of years of hard work that not everyone could comprehend. When the paperwork was nearly complete, David turned to the old man, his tone full of respect. "Sir, your money has been fully counted and recorded. Would you like to deposit it all into a savings account or keep a portion for other uses?" The old man smiled gently and said, "Deposit it all into my savings account. I don't need much, just a safe place to keep this money. Thank you." His simple yet profound words silenced the initial disdain in the room, replacing it with an awkward but respectful silence. The manager stood to the side, lips pursed, unable to say a word. He nodded to David to continue, inwardly ashamed of his initial attitude. The onlookers, both employees and customers, watched the old man quietly, as if they had just received an unforgettable lesson. After the counting was complete, David politely handed the transaction receipt to the old man. The bank remained unusually quiet, with hardly anyone daring to speak. But a wealthy customer in an expensive suit, unable to contain his curiosity, stepped forward and asked the old man how he had saved so much money. "I never would have imagined." Mr. John looked up, his gaze gentle and calm. He gave a slight smile, his voice slow but warm. "Nothing special, friend. I'm just a man who sold lottery tickets and collected recyclables. I did this work for decades. Every cent I earned came from hard work. On scorching days, I couldn't bear to spend an extra penny. I just saved for a secure old age because I knew no one would take better care of me than myself." His heartfelt words were like a cool breeze through a stifling room. Everyone in the bank, from employees to customers, was struck with astonishment and emotion. A young woman standing nearby lowered her head in silence. She had whispered to her friend that the old man was useless, but now those words filled her with embarrassment. Another bank employee who had mocked the old man now avoided eye contact. Turning to a colleague, he sighed softly. "We were so wrong. We didn't expect him to save so much, living so frugally." David, the only one who had stood up for the old man from the start, held the receipt tightly. Before handing it back respectfully, he bowed and said, "Grandpa, I truly admire you, not just for the money, but for your patience and strong will. Thank you for teaching me and everyone here a great lesson." Mr. John nodded slightly, his eyes bright but his face adorned with a gentle smile. "No need, young man. Everyone faces hardships in life. I just hope people respect each other, no matter how they look." His story quickly spread throughout the bank. Customers who had been whispering earlier now fell silent, looking at the old man with respect. One stepped forward, gave a slight bow, and said, "Sir, you've made me rethink many things. Thank you for sharing your story." The bank manager stood silently in the back, shame creeping from his heart. He avoided the old man's gaze, bowing deeply. His voice choked. "We apologize for not respecting you from the start, I promise. Our bank will never let this happen again." Though the apology was sincere, it couldn't erase the guilt of those who had mocked him. Yet the old man held no grudges or anger. He simply nodded, offering a gentle smile, like a kind father generously, forgiving his errant children. The old man slowly stood, taking the transaction receipt. His frail figure still exuded calm and confidence. As he prepared to leave with his empty sack, the bank doors suddenly opened and an elegantly dressed middle-aged man walked in. "Dad, are you done?" a warm voice called, drawing everyone's attention. Mr. John looked up and smiled kindly. "You're here." The man quickly stepped to the old man's side, bending down to gently pick up the sack. Whispers filled the bank. "This old man is his father." "Who is that man?" "He looks distinguished." The confusion didn't last long. A nearby customer recognized the middle-aged man and exclaimed, "That's Mr. Williams. He's the president of the region's largest construction company." The revelation stunned the bank's employees and customers. Their gazes darted between the middle-aged man and the old man, their faces showing unmasked astonishment. The man, still holding the sack, turned to the crowd, his voice filled with pride. "Yes, he's my father. But my father has always wanted a simple, independent life. I've invited him to rest and live with family many times, but he always refuses. He says it's his own business." The bank fell silent. The employees who had mocked the old man couldn't even lift their heads. The manager, who had ordered the old man's removal, stood frozen, his eyes awkwardly fixed on the floor. After a few seconds of silence, the manager stepped forward, his face pale and eyes full of regret. He bowed deeply, his voice trembling. "Sir, we're truly sorry for disrespecting you from the start. I didn't know who you were." Other employees bowed in unison, some murmuring, "We were wrong. We're so sorry." Mr. John smiled, his gaze gentle without a hint of blame. He looked directly at the manager and said softly, "You don't need to apologize to me. My identity doesn't matter. What matters is how we treat each other, no matter who they are or how they're dressed. Everyone deserves respect." His words swept through the room like a breeze, dispelling the earlier awkwardness and leaving a profound lesson for everyone present. The old man's son nodded in agreement, turning to the bank staff with a frank but gentle tone. "I hope today's story is a lesson for us all. Don't let appearances or stereotypes shape how we view others." The bank employees and manager nodded silently, their eyes filled with regret. The old man, supported by his son's arm, slowly stood. His small figure no longer seemed out of place, but radiated a powerful presence, like a vivid lesson in dignity and self-respect. The room, once noisy and scornful when he entered, was now filled with respect and reflection. After all the procedures were complete, the old man stood, his frail shoulders slightly straighter, his eyes filled with contentment. As he looked at his son, refined and elegant, held his father's hand, guiding him out of the transaction area. Everyone in the bank, from customers to employees, silently watched the father and son. Their gazes were no longer scornful or curious, but filled with respect and admiration. As the old man passed, David, the young employee who had defended him, from the start, bowed deeply, his voice full of reverence. "Grandpa, thank you for teaching me a great lesson. Wishing you good health." Mr. John turned, his gaze gentle as he looked at the young man. With a faint smile, he said, "Thank you. People like you will do many good things in the future." As the old man and his son walked out of the bank, a special atmosphere enveloped the space. The bank staff, especially the manager, immediately held an internal meeting. During the meeting, the manager said sternly, "What happened today must never happen again. We wrongly judged by appearances. From now on, every customer who comes here, no matter who they are, must be treated with the utmost respect." The young employee who stood by the old man was praised by the manager. "You did well. We'll entrust you with more responsibilities in your work. Keep that spirit." This was not only recognition for the entire bank staff, but also a valuable lesson. One evening, after the old man sold his last batch of lottery tickets, his son arrived in a luxury car. He knelt to help his father into the vehicle. Before closing the door, the old man looked back at the familiar street, smiling faintly. A contented farewell. The story ends with the image of a luxury sedan driving away slowly. In that small frame radiated a proud and kind spirit. The old man, even unintentionally, left everyone who witnessed it with a profound lesson about respect, patience, and human value. Today's story reminds us that a person's worth lies not in their appearance or possessions, but in their dignity, self-respect, and what they silently dedicate their life to. The old man in the story not only taught the bankers a lesson, but also inspired us all to be patient and respect others.